Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Dinner Table Detective, Season 1, Episode 3. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we pick up where the last episode left off with Satomi passing out, and it's kind of exactly what I thought it was. I suggested last episode, I at the time it said like, oh, she passed out because she was just trying to cover for someone, and I was completely wrong about who the person she was covering for. I was like, oh, she's got to be covering for her dad, right? It's like, no, she wasn't. But I should have figured as much, like, because what sold it for me was like the moment she woke up, what did she do? And they were like, oh, like you were going to say something, right? And she's like, no, kind of like, no, I wasn't going to say anything. She shuts down. But we find out later on that wasn't like her doing that on purpose. She became so overwhelmed when they were probably tiptoeing towards the truth that she passed out. But Reiko notices like there's some like, I forgot what the exact wording was what they used to describe it, but it's stuff from like the covering of the window like she used. I'm like, okay, so I was like, she tied her, or at the time I don't think I knew it was her, but I was like, someone tied around like the murder weapon and threw it through the second door, like story window. Like I was like, is that how that worked? And ultimately ends up being the case. But then you have like Kazuo, obviously talking to Satomi's dad about breaking into the safe so that they could, because they're like, oh, like they believe his mom wanted to leave everything to Maeda, and it's like, I'm not gonna let that happen. Mom said I wasn't good enough to lead the business, but he doesn't deserve it either. But it's like, I'm not gonna change or shift the will. I just want to check it out. And at least it is interesting conversation later on with Maeda, where he kind of talks about all the people in this family are scum. But now you kind of find out later on why he has such resentment specifically against this family. But I think he has issues with the rich in general, because he's like, right, you should never trust the sons and daughters of a rich, prominent family. And at first I was like, why is Kirishiro and Reiko getting so upset about that? And then I had to remind myself, all right, they're two people from two rich, powerful families, because they were agreeing with him like, oh yeah, the people in this family are scum, they kind of suck. But it's kind of like, hey, don't put all like sons and daughters of rich families in the same boat. We're not that bad, you know? So it took me a second to remember that element to it. I was like, all right. So we find out that Goro has an alibi because he was on the phone with someone at the time, but that person could easily just be covering for him. In fact, they could have been a partner in all of this. So, but it's not till Reiko goes home that she talks to Kageyama, and Kageyama's like, well, whatever your worries are, my lady, tell me. And she's like, actually, I'm not going to confide in you about the case, because the last time I did, and that was episode 1, you ridiculed, no, not that episode 1, episode 2, and you called me a complete moron. And he's like, I promise, my lady, I won't do it again. And she's like, fine, and confided in him. He's like, I'm sorry, and starts kind of laughing. He's like, I can barely hold back the laughter at just the sheer absurdity. And she's like, you said you weren't going to call me a moron. He's like, I didn't. She's like, sheer absurdity. She's like, it's tiptoeing toward you calling me a moron. But then he basically lays out all the facts. That's the thing. He's not even investigating things firsthand. He's hearing about all this secondhand, and he still ends up solving the case. The guy's pretty good. But yeah, things, obviously he breaks down like the whole Satomi of it all. She ended up like stumbling across the crime scene and saw that Goro's name was written. And it's like, interesting. But then later on when Kageyama was like, oh yeah, but not all dying messages and clues, can be taken at face value. I was like, right. Because she could have already been dead and someone wrote the dying message with her finger, which ultimately ended up being happening. But Satomi saw that the message said Goro, so she scrubbed away the dying message. She's also the one that got rid of the murder weapon, because Kageyama had thrown out there like, if they wanted to mess with the timetable of this murder, why go through the trouble of throwing it to the second floor? Because like Kishiro and Reiko, well, specifically it's Kishiro's theory, like the fact of the matter is it was thrown to the second floor. He's like, maybe it was meant to go for the third floor, because it's like, it is interesting that Satomi's room is right above the room where the murder weapon was found. But obviously that we find out the relevance of that later is she tossed it in herself. But anyway, going back to what Kageyama was saying, I thought was interesting. It's like, right, you could easily mess with the timetable and make it easier on yourself by throwing it to the first floor. But the reason why they didn't throw it to the first floor, they threw it to the second floor, was to cover up the fact is and make it seem like, hey, whoever threw this had to be someone athletic enough to do that. That being Akiko or Goro. They're the only ones that would be athletic enough to do that. So, and then it's like, well, then that means they're only doing that because they're trying to remove themselves from the suspect list. Because whoever did this, you remove them from the suspect list because you're like, well, it has to be someone who can do it, and here's these other people who can't do it. And then, and I even love like Reiko being like, wait, you're not telling me Satomi had anything to do with it. He was like, don't be ridiculous. But then once again, she's not the murderer, but she covered up the crime. And it's like, well, why would she go through the trouble of covering it up? Because I said last episode, I thought like, whoa, it makes sense for her to cover for her dad. But then like, right, you look at her phone background, it's a picture of her and Goro. So it's like, right. She's a little girl that has a crush on a slightly older dude, and so she admires him and was trying to protect him. But once again, like, she got so overwhelmed when like the detectives were asking questions, and like all that was just too much for her, and that's when she fainted, because she was dealing with the fact is like, oh my god, if the cops find out that I covered up the crime scene, they're gonna find out Goro was the actual killer, and she was just trying to protect him. So but then you're kind of like, okay, so the murderer is definitely Goro then, right? But then Kageyama points out something very interesting, that it's like, why would a killer go through the trouble of framing Goro? Because he does have an alibi for that time. So it's like, why would someone go through that trouble when Kazuo would make more sense? Well, who was the one suspect that wasn't at dinner that night? Maeda. I was like, interesting. I was like, that's really neat. Once again, I love me a good whodunit, because I like trying to figure out who, like, the pieces before it's revealed. I was like, interesting, because I didn't know who it was going to be. I did not know it was going to be Maeda under that mask. So I was like, interesting. Because he wasn't there at dinner, so he picked someone at random, Goro. But then the problem was, it's not until like he figured it out, like around the time, like before Satomi passed out, like around that time is when he found out, oh, she's the one that covered up the crime. So I guess that's who he was trying to kill at the end of the episode. Well, when he like showed up with that sword, he was trying to probably kill her, which is super effed up. Because I'm like, who else were you trying to kill in that moment? Like, were you going to try and kill Goro? That wouldn't make any sense. So I'm like, it had to be like you trying to go after Satomi to get rid of her, as like, because the whole point was eventually Satomi would most likely get so guilt-ridden that she'd admit that she erased Goro's name, and then that kind of puts so much into question. And then once again, like, who'd be the number one suspect, knowing like, well, why would someone put Goro's name and not Kazuo? He's the more obvious choice. Once again, it's a lot of conjecture in that part, but still. Either way, we find out the truth about Maeda. His family, his mom and dad had a barber shop, and Kinue took it from them, and they kind of were broken afterwards. They lost their spirits, and eventually, like, his dad died in an accident and his mom followed soon after. And so all he wanted to do was get close to Kinue so that he could, like, basically get his revenge. But she ended up, like, that night, she ended up confronting him. She's like, I've known who you were since I hired you. She's like, you came to get revenge on me because of your family's barbershop, right? And it's like, did you think you were going to, like hijack my family's company from me? It's like, don't even think about it. And it's like, you're fired because of all that you're trying to do. Because she was trying to spin things in a way, because she wanted him to kind of move past things in a way. It's just like, your attempt to try and take over this company, it's so shameful, like, because she tried to say, like, what I did back then, that was just me doing a job. And the fact is, I think it speaks volumes that she even remembers it. Most people wouldn't remember it, but it was significant for her, because it was like the first thing she did as president. So it was significant enough for her to remember. She didn't look back, but I think Maeda was just so fueled with so much anger of, like, how much pain was caused at that time. And so hearing her be so dismissive of him like that, and she was about to go grab the key, I was like, so what's the key for? What's that all about? And then he bashed her over the head. So that's where the key comes into all of this, because she was about to pull it out the drawer when he attacked her. So I'm like, still don't know what the key's for. It's obviously not for the safe, because there's a combination for it then. So But they ultimately figure out, well, I think it was Kageyama actually who figured out what the safe combination is, because Kinue took over the business in 95 from Maeda's family. But then why is it the picture that she holds so dear had the code? Why does it have year 1985, the year that business was founded by Maeda's family? But then like that ends up being the code to the safe. They open it, and then Kazuo was happy because all the stocks go to him. There wasn't really anything left for Goro and Akiko except for a family book of memories. And then the thing that was left for Maeda was a note. She was apologetic about what she did because she was like, that was me when I was younger. I was immature and I did a terrible thing. Like, I didn't think about the consequences of what, like, I didn't, I didn't think about what that did to your family. So she wanted him to move past this. I know what you're capable of. And so the key was going to be like him owning a bit. Like, there was going to be like a building she bought, and one of those stores in that building was going to be a barber shop that she was going to leave to him. And it's like, damn. And she was about to give him that key just when he bashed her over the head, but he was so filled with rage. Like, if he hadn't done that, once again, it was kind of a crime of passion, but still, it's just like, damn, that sucks. That sucks big time. And then, now it's like, because Maeda's kind of breaking down. He's like, why would she even do that? Because it's so out of character for her. But then, like, even Reiko was thinking about it later on. It's like, why was she so cold? And Kageyama's thinking about it was most likely she had to be that way because it was the only way to protect her family business. It's like, you have to be cold, you have to be very calculated, you have to kind of be that type of person to, because she was so afraid of ever losing the business, because she's like, my family would be out on the streets. And it's like, that safe is a personification of, like, basically her cold exterior was how she reacted to the world. That safe hid everything that she kind of kept and buried deep down inside, what she really cared about. The fact is that the envelope for Maeda's note was there, and also that memory book. And the family's looking through it. All the siblings are looking through it. And they're like, wow, all this, like, we were happier back then. It's the sad thing. These children that were fighting so much over, like, oh, I should get this, I should get that. They were all so cold-hearted when their mom died because she was cold-hearted. But at the end of the day, you are all very important to her. She cherished those memories. She was cold-hearted because she wanted to make sure this business was never taken from you. She wanted you guys, because she probably knew what it was like to grow up, without a lot. So, when you had that mentality, you worked to never be in that situation again. You work so that your family never has to be in that situation again. And that's just the sad reality of it all. And then Reiko's kind of like, it's sad because it's like, if Kinue had been more honest about her feelings, and then Kageyama finishes it by being like, this whole murder may not have ever happened. If she was a little, and it's just, so much could have been prevented. She could have told Maeda all this herself, but she never did. Like, who knows how long ago she bought that building, because she knew who he was when she hired him. So she might have already had this in place by the time, like, she hired him, and but she couldn't tell people her real feelings. She couldn't tell her children how she really felt about them, that she cherished them and she did so much for them and did care about them. They did matter to her. Even though her and Kazuo, like, got into it, she still loved him and cared for him, and that's why she did leave everything to him, even in her will, like the stocks and stuff. But yeah, like, her family, like, because she's trusting him, I think, to kind of take care of the family. It's just, and that's such a bummer of a note to leave the episode on, of like, yes, everything's resolved, but it's just that bittersweetness at the end of a crime, of just being like, yeah, if she hadn't gone about, like, walking about, like, creating such misunderstandings, but that was her way of dealing with things and dealing with the world, and that was her way to try and secure her family's future and take care of her family. And it's just like, if she had just been a little honest with her feelings, all this could have been prevented. And that just is the sad tragedy of it all. It kind of goes hand in hand with what Kageyama said, of like, you always want to make sure you eat before the resolution of a crime, because it's not gonna feel so good. You're going to kind of basically lose your appetite. And this is one of those things that's just kind of a sad ending, where it's like, yeah, she would have lost her appetite. Even when they were eating, he was like, before we even get into the case, you were explaining stuff to me, make sure you're finished eating first. And, it does prove to be worthwhile in the end. But yeah, very sad resolution to the episode. So I'm interested to see where the next episode takes us. I'm interested to see things progress for Reiko and Kageyama. I wonder, will he always be solving cases inside the house? Like, I mean, it makes sense. Like, why would he be at the crime scene unless it's a situation that Reiko has to show up for and Kageyama just happens to be there, just kind of like episode 1? Not unless they find themselves, well, 1 and 2, but it's like, unless they find themselves in that specific situation, Reiko will probably have to talk to Kageyama about the case after the fact. So, yeah, we'll see how things kind of develop and how things play out going forward. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.